Hello friends, welcome to Awdhesh Academy. Friends, today we are going to learn about the status of corruption in India. What is the meaning of corruption? What is the position of India as far as corruption is concerned? How corruptions are brought to light? These are the issues which we are going to tackle in today's lecture. Now, first of all, we should know where do we figure as far as the corruption is concerned. Are we really the most corrupt country in the world? No, that is not the situation. According to the Transparency International's Global Perception Index for 2017, India is placed at 81st position in the list of 180 countries as far as corruption is concerned. That means there are at least 80 more countries who are more honest than us, but at the same time there are almost 100 countries who are more corrupt than us. It means we are not the most corrupt country in the world. This is not a right perception to say, because many countries are far more corrupt than us. But still, we are among the most corrupt countries. In the year 2016, we were 79th among 176 countries. Now we are 81st. That means we have slided, and that is really a cause of concern. India is also among the worst offenders in terms of graft, that means corruption, and press freedom in the Asia Pacific region. And this is definitely a measure of concern. Now, how do we actually measure the corruption, or how do the Transparency International measures the corruption? It actually rate every country based on the perception from 0 to 100. 100 means 100% honest country, no corruption, and 0 means 100% corrupt country, no honesty. Now you are given points between 0 to 100. India has scored 40 points in 2017, while the average world score was 43. So this shows that we are below the average score of the world, and that is why some people say that we are most corrupt in the world or more corrupt in the world, because we have been rated below the national average, below the international average as far as the corruption is concerned. Now, corruption has many ill effects in the society. Joe Biden, the former vice president of USA, said once, corruption is a cancer that eats away at a citizen's faith in democracy, diminishes the instinct for innovation and creativity. Already tight national budgets, crowding out important national investments, it wastes the talent of the entire generation. It scares away investment and jobs. So when there is corruption in any country, the people's faith in the government loses. For example, in India, how many people have trust over their political masters or the politicians? I think very few people. If the country is corrupt, foreign investment does not come, employment opportunities decline, development does not take place. So corruption is root of all the evils, we can say, as far as the administration is concerned, or as far as the country's development and growth is concerned. But what is corruption? So let us see the definition of corruption as it is given by CVC, or Central Vigilance Commissioner. In this definition, there are basically 4 elements. First is demanding and or accepting illegal gratification. Now the gratification does not mean only taking money. It could be any type of benefits, like for example taking something in kind, taking hospitality, or even taking sexual favors. All these things will fall in the category of gratification. Second is obtaining valuable things without consideration or with inadequate consideration from a person having official dealings with him, or with whom his subordinates have official dealing, or where he can exert influence. So if you have influence over somebody and from him you buy something for free or for inadequate consideration, that means suppose you buy something which is for 1 crore rupees only at 50 lakh rupees, then that is also amounting to corruption. Possessing assets disproportionate to the known source of income. Now, if you are earning a modest salary, say 1 lakh rupees, and you have a flat which is of 1 crore rupees, or you got property worth several crore rupees, that is also corruption, because even though it cannot be linked with any particular act, but the very fact that you are having a property or assets which is more than your known source of income is amounting to corruption. And the fourth is cases of misappropriation, forgery or cheating or any other criminal offense, that will also amount to corruption. The second Administrative Reform Commission was not satisfied with the present definition of corruption. They recommended for widening the scope of corruption to cover other offenses as well. These are the recommendation of SARC. Gross perversion of constitution, willful violation of the oath of office like acting with partisanship or animosity. Now, for example, you belong to a particular political party and you have a particular ideology. Now, if you treat the members of the other ideology or other political party with animosity, destroy their property, even though you may not be taking any money, but that should also be considered corruption. Abuse of authority by unduly favoring or harming anyone. Some people have prejudices based on caste, creed, or they try to benefit somebody, or they want to settle the score with their enemies. So if all these factors are there, any of these factors are there, even though there is no exchange of money, that should also be covered under the corruption. Then SARC also recommended that obstruction or perversion of justice by unduly influencing law enforcement agencies or prosecution. Sometimes you use your position to influence CBI or the police, and that should also be considered corruption even though you may not be getting any money. Squandering the public money, including lavish lifestyle. Many officers or many ministers spend huge amount of public money for renovation of their residences, their offices, and living a very extravagant lifestyle as if they are kings. So all that may be legally permissible, but that should also be considered to be an act of corruption. That is why the CBC recommended this also as part of corruption. Now, one of the very important things we should know, how corruptions come to light. Because every day we are hearing about some corrupt person getting arrested, prosecuted, jailed. How these corruption cases come to light? First is that complaint from the employee or from the public. So the person who has been demanded bribe, he may complain. That is one way the corruption is noticed. Second is departmental inspections and stock verification. What happens that every government department, every year or at a regular interval, there is an inspection by some other independent agency or within another big employee of the government department. So they find sometime that the stock is less. Suppose you have seized 100 kg of gold and on the stock verification it was found that it is only 50 kg of gold, then you find out that there has been a corruption. In the same way, the inspection will also reveal some sort of irregularities, some sort of illegalities. The scrutiny of annual property return, all the government officers are required to submit annual property returns, and so from there if you find that somebody is having a huge property, then that can also give you a hint for corruption. Irregularity detected by the audit and the CAG and the other agencies. So if the CAG or other agencies detect any irregularity during their inspection, that will also be helping in discovering the act of corruption. The next is the complaint and allegations appearing in the press and the social media. Sometimes a corruption case is exposed in the press because people, instead of coming to the government agencies whom they do not have much faith, they go to the press or post these acts of corruption on the social networking website or in the press. So that is also one of the source corruption comes into light. Specific information. So that is also cultivated by the CBI or the CVC. They have their informers, and those informers tell them as to how the corruption is taking place, and based on that they can take action. Then intelligence collected by CBI and the local police. So these are the professional agencies. They visit different places in the market, find out who is corrupt, who is honest, and they develop that information, and that is how the corruption comes to light. And then other sources like telephone tapping. Now telephone tapping power is also given to the police and also the CBI and the DRA and many other agencies and income tax department also. So they keep tapping the telephones, and from there also sometimes they get information about the corruption. So there are different type of sources about the corruption. In most cases, the officer is not caught red-handed giving and taking bribe, because that is a secret act, and generally they have all the precautions. They take all the precautions to see that nobody knows when they are giving bribe or taking bribe. But if you are taking a bribe, you will be doing some sort of mistake, some sort of irregularity in the file, and that becomes basically the starting point of corruption. So the irregularities are identified, and that gives you a doubtful conduct of the officers, and from there we start whether any corruption has taken place. So what are the irregularities which causes doubtful conduct? For example, gross or willful negligence. So you don't do your job properly, and you deliberately don't sign some files or neglect something. Reckless or decision making. So if you are doing a reckless decision making in the sense that you are taking very bold decisions, something which is against the law or something where high risk is involved, that also gives hint for corruption. Blatant violation of systems and procedures. So in government there are procedures and systems which are prescribed. So sometimes what happens that people don't follow those systems, they violate all these systems, and they violate rules. For example, instead of going for tendering, you have directly given the contract to somebody. So these are also the irregularities which give hint that the person has committed a corruption. Exercise of excessive discretion. All officers are given discretion, but if they do excessive exercise of the discretion, for example, if you are doing a assessment of the taxes, you have the discretion. But if you exercise excessively and give a lot of rebate to the party, then that becomes basically conduct which give rise for the corruption angle. Failure to keep the controlling authorities and the superior informed. Many times what happens that the law required or procedure required that whenever you take a particular type of decision, you will keep the superior officers informed, and sometimes the people do it secretly and they don't inform the superiors, and that give rise that there may be a corruption involved in that. So what happens that when irregularity is detected, then an inquiry is ordered. Now all irregularities may not be corruption, because when you are doing so many things, it is possible that some genuine mistakes has been done by you. So the purpose of the inquiry is to find out whether it is a deliberate act or it was a genuine act where some mistake has been done. So an inquiry is only a prima facie indicator of a possible dishonesty. So just because an inquiry has been ordered, it does not mean that you have been found to be corrupt. It is just the beginning of the process. And what is important is that it should be find out whether any loss has taken place to the government or not. Because whenever you benefit somebody, generally it comes at the loss of the government. An inquiry is required to ascertain if there is a case of corruption or your actions are bona fide. Because the same action can be done by a person in a bona fide manner and also a corrupt manner. For example, if suppose somebody is you are a police officer and you have killed a criminal. Now there are two possibilities. One, that you have genuinely killed the person because that person is a criminal and so in the national interest you have done it. And the second possibility is that you have killed the person because he was not giving you money. You demanded some money, the person refused to give, and that is why you have killed. So just the act of killing may not prove that you are corrupt or not. Inquiry is required to be done. And the department inquiry is generally ordered to find out whether there is a mala fide action. That means whether you have done in the good faith, in the interest of the department, in the interest of the country, or you have done it deliberately in a wrong manner. So if you have done something in mala fide, then action starts, and then the corruption acts normally come into light. So friends, today we have learned about the status of corruption in India. What is the definition of corruption? How corruptions come into light? What is inquiry? So these are the basic concepts you should know about the corruption, and we will continue this lesson in the subsequent chapters. Thank you very much for watching the video. Friends, today we are going to learn about the causes of corruption. How corruption was noticed in our country, what steps were taken to identify the causes of corruption and take suitable action to reduce the corruption. So in 1962, the Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri, he appointed K. Santhanam to preside over a committee on anti-corruption. When India got independence, that time there was hardly any corruption on the top level. Most of the ministers were of very high moral value. They came from the struggle. Their goal was not to get power, but to get independence for the country. They were full of moral values. So the corruption was virtually non-existent. In the same way, the top level of civil services were also non-corrupt. Though at the lower level, corruption existed then also. However, gradually corruption started seeping in, and some charges were made against the top level administration also. So in 1962, Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, who was the Prime Minister then, he appointed K. Santhanam to preside over a committee which was looking for anti-corruption issues. The committee is popularly known as Santhanam Committee on Anti-Corruption because the work which it has done was tremendous. The recommendations which it made were subsequently followed, and it has really made a beginning of the government's fight against the corruption. The report of the Santhanam Committee provided the basis for administrative and legal structure and processes to combat corruption as the time went by. So what were the observations of the Santhanam Committee? Santhanam Committee observed that corruption cannot be eliminated or reduced unless preventive measures are taken and implemented in the proper manner. It means you cannot go and keep picking the people who are corrupt, because there are millions of government employees. You cannot catch all the corrupt people and then prosecute them. The right way is to create a situation, develop a preventive mechanism so that the corruption is not started at all. So he suggested that the preventive measures must include administrative, legal, social, economic and educative measures. One of his recommendations was setting of Central Vigilance Commissioner or CVC, which was done by the government in 1964 for looking the cases against the corruption of central government employees. The committee identified the 4 causes of corruption. One was administrative delays. When there are administrative delays, when you take time for action, you apply for something and it is pending for months and months, then corruption starts, because people want decisions early and they will pay money for it. For example, if suppose 1 crore rupees of refund is to be given to you and there is a delay of 1 month or there is a delay of 1 year. If there is a delay of 1 year, you almost lose 10 lakh rupees. If the delay of 1 month, again you lose 1 lakh rupees. So if suppose you are asked to pay bribe to expedite it, maybe you will pay a bribe because you are losing money every day. In the same way, if any permission is to be given and the permission is delayed, there is a scope of corruption. If suppose permission is given within 24 hours, then there is no case of corruption. So administrative delay is one of the reasons of corruption. Regulatory function by the government is also the reason of corruption. if for every damn thing you have to take permission from the government, then there is a scope of corruption. Like in earlier era, if you want to start a company, you take license from the Central Excise Department. So there was a scope of corruption. Now government said registration. You take registration, you apply for registration, and it will be given to you within a period of 7 days. If it is not given, it will be deemed to be given. And so what happened? The regulatory function was transformed and it was only like an intimation. So the scope of corruption was reduced. Discretion vested with the government officer. If the government officers have tremendous discretion, they can misuse it. So as less discretion, less corruption. 4 is the cumbersome procedure. If you make the procedure very complex, then there is a scope of corruption, because ordinary people will not be able to follow all the procedures. There will be some procedural violations and the government officer will deny them the benefit, and that will give rise to corruption. When we are talking about corruption, we should understand that there are basically 2 types of corruption. One is the coercive corruption, where the government officer forcefully take the bribe. Like if you go to, let us say, RTO office and you have to take a license, driving license, he refuses to give unless you pay him the bribe. That's an example of coercive corruption. The second is the collusive corruption. Collusive corruption means when bribe giver, bribe taker, both are involved. So there is a company which is evading 1 crore rupees of tax every year. Out of that, they give 10 lakh rupees to the tax officer. So that's a case of collusive corruption, because both of them are benefiting each other. Contractors. You award a contract to a particular party, get some money in return. Nobody knows, because ultimately you have exchanged the money and the result is that the quality of the construction will go down. So the corruption is not only coercive, forceful, it is also collusive, and collusive corruption is also very, very common in India. All major scandals which have been brought in India are generally collusive in nature. To stop the collusive corruption, it is provided that the bribe giver is also guilty of corruption under the Prevention of Corruption Act. However, he will get an immunity if he deposes against the bribe taker, or if he has been forcefully asked to give bribe within 7 days. If he goes to the proper government authority, he will get immunity. Otherwise, bribe giver and bribe taker both are equally guilty of corruption. See, in the normal course, in normal criminal justice system, every person is treated as innocent till he is proven guilty. It is the job of the prosecution to prove that the person has committed an offense. But in case of corruption, the burden of proof is on the person who is accused of the crime. If a corruption charge is made against you, you have to prove that you are innocent. And if you are unable to prove, then you will be treated as corrupt. So this is a very, very important provision in Prevention of Corruption Act. The second thing is that if the corruption is found to take money, the court shall presume that it is the bribe unless the accused proves that it is not a bribe. Now suppose somebody is giving some money to somebody. A government officer is there, you are giving say 10,000 rupees to him. He was caught red-handed. He will give the explanation that this person owed me this much of money, he is giving me that money. And then both will let aside, because both of them has to go jail because of one for giving bribe, one for taking bribe. So this is not permitted. The court will presume that if the money is given to the government officer, it is bribe. So both of them has to prove that it is not bribe. If they are unable to prove, it will be presumed to be bribe and both of them will be punished. The SARC has made some more recommendations regarding collusive bribery, which is actually taking a huge proportion in our country, as every year we are finding some scandals breaking in some part of the country. Now, SARC has recommended that if the outcome or the intended outcome of the transaction leads to the loss to the state, the public or the public interest, it should be treated as collusive bribery. That means if I have taken a decision which has caused a loss to the government to some amount, for example, this coal case or 2G case, then it should be presumed that there is a case of corruption. Today it is not the case. Generally it is not the case because you have to prove that some money has been exchanged. So SARC has recommended that if there is a loss, you presume that there is a case of corruption. And SARC has also recommended that the punishment for such cases should be 10 years because these are more serious in nature because both are conniving with each other and both are powerful people. There is no extortion involved, there is no coercion involved, and both of them are working to harm the country. That's why it has recommended that the maximum punishment should be 10 years. So today we have learned about the evolution of corruption, how the corruption process started, what steps has been taken, about the Santhanam committee, about the different causes of corruption. So I hope that you've got a good knowledge about the causes of corruption and what is the presumption in case of Prevention of Corruption Act. And we will continue with this chapter in the subsequent lectures also. Thank you very much for watching the video.